The night was heavy with rain as Emily said, "Why did you hide this from me?" Her voice cracked as lightning split the dark sky. The silence from David pierced her soul deeper than the storm outside. Emily's chest heaved as she clutched the letter in trembling hands. The words written there felt like knives carving through years of fragile hope. She thought she had endured loss, but this betrayal was new. David turned away, his face hidden in the shadows. He said, "I didn't want you to break." Yet Emily felt shattered, her breath coming in ragged bursts. The truth she had long suspected was finally undeniable. Every moment of love, every whispered promise, now felt poisoned. The room spun with grief and fury as the world she clung to collapsed in a single night. The storm calmed to a drizzle, but Emily's heart raged. She sat alone, replaying every moment, every lie in her mind. The silence of the house grew unbearable, echoing louder than thunder. She whispered, "I don't even know who you are anymore." Her words filled the emptiness like broken glass. Memories of laughter and warmth now twisted into thorns. Emily pressed her face into her hands, searching for answers in the darkness. She wondered if she had ever truly known love, or only illusions built to keep her from breaking sooner. The letter lay on the floor like a wound that refused to close. Emily reached for it again, her fingers brushing its damp edge. She wanted to tear it apart, but the truth it carried was indestructible. She said softly, "This can't be all there is." The words trembled in her throat, unanswered by silence. The storm outside had passed, but her storm was only beginning. Shadows danced in the room as she struggled to breathe, knowing the world had already changed forever. She rose unsteadily, walking to the mirror. Her reflection stared back, almost unrecognizable. Emily said, "Who am I without him?" Her lips barely moved, her voice like a ghost. The mirror showed not only her face but the years of pain she carried in silence. She touched her cheek, tracing the lines of exhaustion carved by heartbreak. For the first time, she saw herself as both fragile and unyielding. The house was suffocating, filled with shadows of lies. Emily opened the front door and stepped into the damp night air. The cool wind carried the smell of rain, wrapping her like fragile comfort. She whispered, "I can't stay here." The words escaped like prayer, trembling in the night. Every drop from the roof echoed her breaking heart. She looked up at the sky, searching for something to hold on to, but only emptiness answered. Emily walked through the quiet hallway of her childhood home, the wallpaper faded but still clinging to the walls. She touched the frame of a family photo and whispered, "We looked so happy." The echo of her own voice felt like a stranger's. Memories returned uninvited, each one colored by the truth she now knew. She saw herself as a little girl chasing shadows, unaware of the secrets that surrounded her. Emily said, "Maybe I was never meant to know peace." Her chest tightened as she wondered if every smile she once believed was real had only been part of an elaborate mask to shield her from pain. Emily sat at the old dining table, her fingers tracing the scratches carved into the wood. She remembered laughter once filling this room, but now silence weighed heavier than stone. She said, "Every mark tells a story, but some stories should have stayed buried." Her heart swelled with longing for a time before betrayal turned her trust into ash. She leaned back, staring at the ceiling, wondering if the house itself remembered the arguments, the slammed doors, and the truths left unsaid. Was it always this fragile? She asked aloud, as though the walls themselves might answer. She found herself in the attic, dust motes swirling in shafts of fading light. Boxes lined the corners, filled with fragments of lives half forgotten. Emily opened one and pulled out a small doll, its dress torn. She whispered, "You were mine once before everything changed." Her hands shook as she pressed it against her chest, the innocence it carried feeling foreign now. The attic creaked as the wind rattled the rafters, and for a moment she felt like a child again, scared and alone in the dark. She said, "I never escaped, did I?" Later, Emily walked through the garden behind the house. The grass was wet from the earlier storm, and the air smelled of earth. She touched the petals of a rose, sharp thorns scratching her skin lightly. "Even beauty cuts," she murmured, the words heavy with meaning. Every flower reminded her of her mother's hands, nurturing yet stern. She thought of nights spent watching her parents argue, the roses trembling in the wind outside. Emily said, "The garden always knew more than I did." Her breath caught as she realized how much of her pain had been sown in soil she never asked to tend. Emily returned inside, carrying the weight of memories she could not release. She sat at the foot of her bed, the shadows long across the room. "I keep chasing peace, but I only find ghosts," she said quietly, her eyes fixed on the floor. The letter still haunted her thoughts, but now old wounds rose to meet it, weaving grief into every corner of her soul. She closed her eyes, imagining a life untouched by betrayal. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Maybe I was never meant to heal." Yet, even as the thought escaped, a flicker of defiance stirred within her chest. Emily sat across from her confidant, Sarah, her oldest friend, the weight of silence pressing between them. Sarah said, "You can't carry this alone." Emily clenched her jaw, staring at the untouched coffee before her. The cafe hummed with quiet chatter, but it all blurred into noise. Emily whispered, "What if I was never enough for him?" Sarah leaned closer, her hand resting on Emily's arm, steady but firm. "This isn't about you. His lies are not your reflection." Emily's chest tightened, anger rising like a tide she could no longer hold back. She said, "Then why does it feel like I'm drowning in his choices?" That night, David returned, his presence heavy in the doorway. Emily stood frozen, her fists clenched. "Why now?" she asked, her voice trembling with restrained fury. David said, "Because you deserve the truth, even if it's ugly." His words cut deeper than silence. Emily's heart pounded, her thoughts splintering. She wanted to scream, to shatter the walls around them. Instead, her voice shook as she said, "You destroyed everything, and now you want forgiveness?" David's shoulders sagged, but his eyes carried no apology, only a weary defiance that made her feel even more betrayed. Emily walked through the rain-slicked streets alone, her breath visible in the cold night air. Each step felt like defiance, though her heart ached. She whispered, "I will not break." Yet her mind replayed David's words, a loop that gnawed at her resolve. Passing strangers blurred, their faces indifferent to her pain. She felt invisible, just another ghost wandering the city. Emily stopped beneath a street lamp, tilting her head back, letting raindrops sting her face like punishment. "I have to choose who I'll become," she said softly, though her voice cracked, betraying how lost she felt. Sarah found Emily the next morning, sitting on a park bench, shivering though the sun had risen. Sarah said, "You can't keep running from yourself." Emily turned slowly, her face pale, eyes swollen. "I don't know who I am without the lies," she admitted, her voice fragile. Sarah sat beside her, pulling her close, holding her against the weight of the morning. Emily whispered, "I keep searching for a version of me that never existed." Sarah shook her head and said, "Then make a new one." The words hung in the air, daring Emily to believe them. That evening, Emily stood before David once more. The air felt heavy with finality. "You don't get to define me anymore," she said, her voice steady though her hands trembled. David frowned, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. He said, "You'll regret this." Emily shook her head, her eyes burning. "I regret ever believing you." The words struck like thunder, cutting the last fragile thread binding them. Silence followed, suffocating yet liberating. For the first time, Emily felt her pain shift into something else, raw, but laced with the faintest spark of strength. Emily sat at the kitchen table when Sarah arrived, her face pale but determined. Sarah placed an envelope in front of her and whispered, "You need to see this." Emily hesitated, fear gripping her chest. She tore it open, her eyes scanning the papers. Her heart froze as she realized it wasn't David who betrayed her first. It had been her own mother, hiding truths that cut deeper than she imagined. Emily whispered, She knew all along." Sarah said softly. This changes everything. The room spun, the world collapsing under the weight of revelation. Emily confronted her father later that night. He stood by the fireplace, avoiding her gaze. Why didn't you tell me? She demanded, her voice trembling. Her father's shoulders slumped as he whispered, because the truth would have broken you sooner. Tears filled Emily's eyes as anger surged. You let me build my life on lies, she said, her hands shaking. His silence was heavier than any confession. For the first time, she saw him not as her protector, but as a man who chose fear over honesty. Later, Emily sat in the attic again, clutching the doll tighter than before. She whispered, You were here through all of it, weren't you? The silence pressed like an answer. She realized her mother's absence wasn't just distance, it was betrayal. Emily said, She left me with ghosts, not love. Her chest ached as she pressed her forehead to the worn toy. She finally understood why her wounds never healed. They were rooted in secrets planted long ago, buried in the very walls of her home. David returned unexpectedly, his face drawn. He said, You think I'm the only one who lied? Your family built this silence. Emily glared, fury and heartbreak colliding. You don't get to use their sins to erase yours, she spat. David stepped closer, voice shaking. I wanted to protect you, even when I knew it would hurt. Emily's chest heaved as she whispered, All of you chose to protect yourselves, not me. For the first time, David's mask slipped, showing a fracture of regret she had never seen before. Emily stood in the garden under the stars, clutching the envelope. The roses swayed gently, their thorns catching the moonlight. She whispered, Every truth cuts, but I'd rather bleed than live blind. Her hands shook as she felt the weight of betrayal from both David and her family. Yet beneath the grief a spark flickered. Pain had not destroyed her, it had revealed her strength. She looked upward, tears glistening, and said, I will not be silent anymore. The words felt like a vow, echoing into the night. Emily stood at Sarah's apartment door, her body trembling from exhaustion and fear. When Sarah opened it, she saw Emily's hollow eyes and quickly pulled her inside. The warmth of the small living room contrasted sharply with the storm raging in Emily's chest. Emily sat heavily on the couch, her hands clutching her knees. Everything is falling apart, she whispered, her voice cracking. My family lied, David lied, and I don't know if I even know myself anymore. Sarah's eyes filled with quiet determination. Then this is the moment you find yourself, she said firmly. Emily shook her head, tears brimming. I'm not strong enough, she admitted. Sarah placed a hand on her arm. Strength isn't about being unbroken, Emily. It's about standing even when you're shattered. The cemetery stretched endlessly, shrouded in dawn fog. Emily knelt before her mother's grave, her fingers brushing the cold stone as if it could answer her questions. You left me with silence, she said softly, her voice trembling like brittle glass. Did you hide the truth to protect me, or to protect yourself? Her tears stained the soil, mingling with the dew. The air was heavy with damp earth and regret. I carry your wounds, Mother, and I never asked for them, Emily whispered, clutching the gravestone as though it could anchor her. The fog curled around her, cloaking her grief in eerie stillness. You could have told me, and I might have forgiven you, she murmured. But now I'm drowning in secrets you never spoke. When Emily returned home, David stood waiting under the street lamp, rain dampening his shoulders. His eyes were shadowed, but his voice carried urgency. We need to talk, he said, stepping forward. Emily crossed her arms tightly, her voice sharp. You've said enough lies to last a lifetime. David's expression cracked. I never stopped loving you, he admitted, his voice heavy with desperation. Emily's throat tightened as rage battled longing. Love without truth is poison, she said firmly, the words shaking the air between them. David moved closer, raindrops running down his face like tears. Then let me fix it. Emily shook her head. You can't fix what you burned down with your silence. Inside the house, Emily confronted her father with all the fury she had buried. He sat hunched in his chair, shadows making him look smaller than she remembered. "Your lies shaped my life," she shouted, voice breaking. "You left me stumbling in the dark, and I'm the one bleeding for it now." Her father's lips trembled, his eyes shimmering with shame. "I thought if I buried the truth it would protect you," he said. Emily's chest heaved, her fists clenched at her sides. "No," she spat. "You protected yourself, your guilt, your fear. You sacrificed me so you could sleep at night." His silence cut deeper than words, a hollow admission that she had always known but never heard spoken. Emily rushed to the garden, the night air sharp and cold, her heart hammering. She collapsed near the rose bushes, their thorns tearing into her palms as she gripped them. "I can't carry this anymore," she screamed into the night. The stars shimmered above, indifferent to her agony. Her voice cracked, the sound raw and piercing. She sobbed violently, her tears falling onto the damp grass. Yet as the storm within her raged, she felt something shift. The scream emptied her, carving space inside her chest for something beyond pain. Breathless and shaking, she whispered, "I don't want to be silent anymore." Her voice carried into the darkness like a vow, fragile but unbroken. The kitchen felt like a battlefield as Emily stood across from David, the table between them like a wall of years. Her voice trembled, but her words were sharp. "I can't keep living inside the ruins you left." David's eyes flickered with regret, but his jaw stayed tight. "I never meant to destroy you," he said. Emily slammed her hand against the table, her voice rising. "But you did, and every scar on me carries your name." David's shoulders slumped, his mask cracking. "I thought I was protecting you," he whispered. She stepped back, her tears shining in the dim light. "You were protecting yourself." Her voice broke, then hardened. "This ends tonight." Emily confronted her father again, standing in the dim living room where silence had reigned for years. She stared at him, her voice steady, but her body trembling. "Your silence was betrayal too." Her father lifted his weary gaze, shame in his eyes. "I thought I was protecting you," he said softly. Emily shook her head, her voice shaking with rage. "No, you were protecting yourself, hiding in your fear while I carried the weight." He opened his mouth, but no words came. The silence that followed was worse than denial, worse than lies. Emily's chest heaved, her tears burning. For the first time, she saw him not as her father, but as a man who had failed her when she needed him most. In the garden, under cold starlight, Emily faced Sarah. Her friend's face carried fear and love in equal measure. "You're breaking apart," Sarah whispered, stepping forward. Emily clutched her chest, shaking her head. "No, I'm breaking free," she declared. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, her voice trembling. "You don't have to do this alone." Emily stepped back, her breath sharp in the night air. "I have to choose me this time," she said, her voice raw. Sarah nodded slowly, her voice heavy with sorrow. "Then fight for yourself, even if it costs you everything." Emily's tears spilled over as she realized the truth. Freedom meant sacrifice, and she could no longer run from it. David appeared one last time at the garden gate, rain pouring over him. His eyes were wide with desperation. "Don't shut me out completely," he pleaded, his voice breaking. Emily stood motionless in the storm, her body drenched but her gaze firm. "You shut me out years ago," she said coldly. David stepped forward, his fists clenched. "I thought lies would save us," he cried, his voice carrying through the storm. Emily's tears mixed with rain, her words slicing through the night. "They only buried me alive." Lightning lit the sky, and for a moment, they stood like ghosts of their former selves, both broken, both unwilling to surrender, but Emily finally stronger than his pull. Emily staggered back inside, her body soaked, her soul raw. She collapsed to her knees in the hallway, her palms slapping against the wet floor. The silence pressed in, broken only by her sobs. She screamed, a guttural cry that tore through the house, filled with every betrayal, every lie, every wound. Her voice shook the stillness, echoing against the walls. "I am not your victim anymore," she roared, her chest heaving. Tears blurred her vision, but her scream did not falter. In that moment, she collapsed and rose at once, shattered yet unshaken. The silence after felt deafening, but inside her something shifted. She was scarred, but she was finally her own. The dawn crept gently through the curtains, painting faint gold across pale sheets, each ray brushing Emily's tired face. She sat at the edge of her bed, hands folded loosely in her lap, body weary but spirit strangely lighter. Her chest rose and fell with a rhythm she had forgotten she could trust. "I survived the storm," she whispered, the words fragile yet undeniable. The air carried no echo of fear, only the hush of renewal. She thought of her mother's harsh silence, her father's absence, David's betrayal, Sarah's unwavering kindness. They all lived within her, but none defined her anymore. Each scar felt less like a wound, and more like a story written into her skin. For the first time, she sensed herself whole, untethered. The silence no longer pressed heavy. It opened, like a blank page waiting for her voice. Later that morning, Emily walked slowly through the quiet streets of her neighborhood. Rain lingered on leaves, catching sunlight in trembling beads, while the air smelled clean, washed of yesterday's storms. Children's laughter floated distantly, a melody untouched by sorrow. Her steps were unhurried, each one pressing firmly into the earth as though staking her claim to the world again. She brushed her fingertips along the rough brick walls, grounding herself in their solid texture. "I don't need to erase my scars," she whispered, voice steady, lips curling faintly. "They are proof that I survived." A passerby glanced at her smile and returned it without words, the small exchange holding a quiet grace. The world no longer closed around her like a cage. It unfolded like a horizon stretching into endless unknown. She felt the ache within her chest, but welcomed it, for it was alive, real, and hers. In the park, Emily returned to the bench where she and Sarah had once shared heavy truths. The trees swayed gently, their leaves whispering like old companions. Sarah arrived quietly, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. She placed one in Emily's hands, the warmth seeping into her chilled fingers. "I don't know who I'll be tomorrow," Emily admitted, her gaze fixed on the shifting patterns of sunlight on the grass. Sarah's hand rested lightly over hers. "That's the beauty of it," she replied softly, her eyes holding no judgment, only unwavering support. Emily exhaled a shaky breath, her lips curving into the faintest smile. "For the first time, I am not afraid to find out." The silence between them stretched, not as a void, but as a cradle of understanding. It was a silence that healed, a silence that spoke louder than words. Together they sipped, grounded in presence, anchored in hope. That evening, Emily wandered back into the garden. The roses glowed faintly in the twilight, their petals jeweled with dew. She reached for one, pricking her fingertip against a thorn. A drop of blood welled, vivid against the pale bloom. She did not flinch. "Even beauty hurts," she murmured, the words lingering in the air like prayer. But this time, the sting didn't drown her. It reminded her of resilience. She tilted her head skyward, where the first stars pierced the darkening sky like promises. Her breath slowed, steady as the night wrapped her in cool serenity. She whispered, "I am enough." The words no longer carried desperation but conviction. Around her, the garden breathed, alive, echoing her truth. The silence was not oppressive, it was a companion, a gentle witness. She stayed there long, cradled by twilight, letting the night bless her with quiet acceptance. Emily paused at her front door, hand on the frame, the night alive with starlight above her. She turned, eyes sweeping over the garden, the quiet street. The infinite sky stretched wide. Every shadow seemed softer, no longer threatening. Her lips parted, and she whispered, "I will not be silent anymore." The words left her like a vow, drifting into the night air with a power that felt eternal. She closed the door softly behind her, the sound gentle but final, her shadow swallowed by the quiet house. Yet the silence no longer haunted, it belonged to her. Each room, once echoing with ghosts, now felt like a canvas she would fill with her own voice. Her story was not finished, but for the first time she would be its author. The silence that followed was not emptiness but peace, carrying within it the breath of a new beginning.